The morning sun cast long shadows across the military cemetery as Sarah Martinez knelt beside her brother's grave. The marble headstone was cold beneath her fingertips as she traced the engraved letters, Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, United States Marine Corps, killed in action. 3 years had passed since that terrible day, but the pain still felt fresh, like an open wound that refused to heal. Sarah wore her dress blue uniform with pride, the crisp fabric a stark contrast to the grief that weighed heavy in her chest. Today was Veterans Day, and she had taken leave from her current assignment to honor Miguel's memory. The small flag in her hand trembled as she placed it beside the headstone, her vision blurring with unshed tears. "I made it through selection, Miguel," she whispered to the stone. "Just like you always said I would." The cemetery was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and the occasional rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze. Sarah had arrived early, wanting these precious moments alone with her brother before the day's ceremonies began. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn photograph of them both in uniform, taken just months before Miguel's final deployment. In the photo, Miguel's arm was draped proudly around her shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera. She had just graduated from basic training then, full of hope and determination to follow in his footsteps. Miguel had always been her hero, the older brother who protected her from playground bullies and encouraged her dreams when others said a girl from their neighborhood had no business joining the Marines. "You should have seen their faces when I told them about the selection," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Remember how you used to say I was tougher than any of the boys in your unit? You were right, hermano. You were always right." The selection she referred to was something she couldn't discuss openly, even here in this sacred place. The training had been brutal, pushing her body and mind beyond limits she never knew existed. Only a handful of candidates had made it through, and even fewer had received the assignment that now defined her military career. The patch hidden beneath her regulation sleeve was proof of that achievement, a symbol of elite status that came with sacrifices most people couldn't imagine. Sarah stood slowly, brushing dirt from her uniform. In the distance, she could see other families beginning to arrive for the day's commemoration. Children ran between the headstones while parents called after them to be respectful. The sight made her smile despite her sadness. Miguel would have loved seeing the families together, honoring their fallen loved ones. As she turned to leave, Sarah noticed an elderly man approaching with a small bouquet of flowers. He moved carefully, his steps measured and deliberate. She recognized him immediately as Mr. Henderson, a World War II veteran who had served with Miguel's grandfather decades ago. The old man had made it a point to visit Miguel's grave every Veterans Day since the funeral. "Sarah, dear," Mr. Henderson said, his weathered face creasing into a gentle smile. "I hoped I might see you here today." "Mr. Henderson," Sarah replied, straightening into a respectful posture. "It's good to see you, sir." "Your brother would be proud of you," the elderly veteran said, placing his flowers beside Sarah's flag. "I hear you're doing important work now, though I suspect you can't tell an old man like me much about it." Sarah nodded, appreciating his understanding. Mr. Henderson had been around the military long enough to recognize when someone carried classified responsibilities. "He's the reason I push myself every day, sir. I want to honor his memory." "You already do, child. Just by being here, by serving with the same dedication he showed." Mr. Henderson patted her shoulder gently. "But, remember to take care of yourself too. Your brother wouldn't want his memory to become a burden you carry alone." Those words stayed with Sarah as she made her way back to her car. The drive to the base would take about an hour, giving her time to compose herself before the formal ceremonies began. She had been selected to participate in the honor guard detail, a responsibility she took seriously despite the personal cost of wearing her dress uniform so soon after visiting Miguel's grave. The radio played softly as she drove, a mixture of patriotic songs and news updates about various Veterans Day events across the country. Sarah found herself thinking about the contrast between her public service and the secret work that now consumed most of her time. Few people knew about the specialized unit she belonged to, and even fewer understood the type of missions they conducted. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her commanding officer. "Ceremony starts at 1400 hours. Report to staging area by 1300. Sarah glanced at the clock on her dashboard. She had plenty of time, but military punctuality was ingrained in her DNA. Being early wasn't just preferred, it was expected. As she approached the base gates, Sarah felt the familiar mixture of pride and responsibility that came with wearing the uniform. The guard recognized her immediately, snapping to attention as he checked her identification. "Good morning, Sergeant Martinez. Beautiful day for the ceremony." "Yes, it is," Sarah agreed, though her heart was still heavy from the morning's visit to the cemetery. The base was bustling with activity as families and veterans arrived for the commemoration. Colorful banners hung from lampposts, and volunteers directed traffic toward the parking areas. Sarah could see the platform where dignitaries would speak, surrounded by rows of chairs for the audience. The American flag flew proudly at the center of it all, its red, white, and blue fabric rippling in the gentle breeze. Sarah parked near the administrative building and gathered her things. Her dress uniform was immaculate, every ribbon and decoration precisely positioned according to regulations. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the emotional challenge ahead. Participating in military ceremonies was always difficult after losing Miguel, but she knew he would want her to serve with honor. The staging area was located in a building adjacent to the main ceremony space. Sarah arrived early, as planned, and found several other Marines already preparing their equipment. The Honor Guard detail was a prestigious assignment, reserved for Marines who demonstrated exceptional military bearing and attention to detail. Martinez called Staff Sergeant Johnson, the detail leader. "Good to have you with us today. I know this one's personal for you." Sarah nodded, appreciating his acknowledgement. Johnson had served with Miguel during one of his earlier deployments, and he understood the significance of this particular Veterans Day for her family. "Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I'm ready." The next hour passed quickly as the team rehearsed their movements and ensured all equipment was properly prepared. Sarah found comfort in the familiar routine of military precision. Every step, every gesture, every breath was choreographed to honor those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. As they prepared to move to the ceremony area, Sarah caught her reflection in a nearby window. The Marine looking back at her was confident and professional, bearing the weight of responsibility that came with the uniform. But, beneath that exterior, she carried secrets that would surprise even her fellow Marines. The hidden patch beneath her sleeve represented years of training and selection that few people could comprehend. It marked her as a member of an elite unit whose very existence was classified. The work she did in the shadows helped protect the freedoms that ceremonies like this one celebrated. "Time to move out," Staff Sergeant Johnson announced. Sarah fell into formation with her fellow Marines, their synchronized steps echoing across the pavement as they marched toward the ceremony area. The crowd was larger than expected, with hundreds of families, veterans, and community members gathered to honor those who had served. As they approached their position near the platform, Sarah noticed a group of young children watching with wide eyes. Their faces showed the same mixture of awe and curiosity she remembered feeling as a child when Miguel would return from deployment. The sight made her smile, knowing that some of these children might one day choose to serve themselves. The ceremony began with the presentation of colors, the honor guard carrying the American flag with the solemnity and respect it deserved. Sarah felt her chest swell with pride as they moved through their carefully rehearsed routine. Every fold of the flag, every precise movement, was a tribute to those who had died defending the principles it represented. When the keynote speaker took the podium, Sarah found herself thinking about the different types of service that weren't represented in the formal program. The special operations community, the intelligence gatherers, the men and women who worked in the shadows to keep the country safe. Their stories rarely made it into public ceremonies, but their sacrifices were no less significant. The speaker, a retired general, spoke eloquently about duty, honor, and sacrifice. His words resonated with the crowd, many of whom dabbed at their eyes as he described the courage of those who had given their lives in service to their country. Sarah thought about Miguel, wondering what he would think of her current assignment. During the moment of silence, Sarah closed her eyes and pictured her brother's face. She remembered his laugh, his terrible jokes, his fierce protection of their family. Miguel had always believed in doing what was right, even when it was difficult or dangerous. That belief had ultimately cost him his life, but it had also inspired Sarah to push herself beyond what she thought possible. The ceremony concluded with the playing of taps, a haunting melody echoing across the base as the crowd stood in respectful silence. Sarah felt tears threatening to fall but maintained her military bearing. The honor guard's job wasn't finished until they had properly retired the colors and dismissed from their formation. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah noticed a commotion near the edge of the ceremony area. A small group of protesters had gathered, their signs critical of recent military operations overseas. Base security was already moving to maintain order, but Sarah could see the anger on some veterans' faces as they noticed the demonstration. "Stay focused," Staff Sergeant Johnson reminded his team as they prepared to march back to the staging area. "We don't engage with protesters. Our job is to honor the fallen, not debate politics." Sarah nodded, though she felt a flash of anger at the timing of the protest. Veterans Day was meant to honor those who had served, regardless of political opinions about specific conflicts or operations. The men and women buried in cemeteries across the country had answered their nation's call, and they deserved respect for that sacrifice. As they reached the staging area, Sarah began the process of carefully storing her ceremonial equipment. The honor guard's rifles, flags, and other materials required meticulous care and attention. It was detailed work, but Sarah found it meditative after the emotional intensity of the ceremony. "You did good out there, Martinez," Staff Sergeant Johnson said as they finished securing the equipment. "Your brother would be proud." "Thank you, Staff Sergeant," Sarah replied. "It means a lot to be able to serve on a day like this." Johnson studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I know you've got other responsibilities now, things you can't talk about. But don't forget that you've got brothers and sisters here who understand what service means. If you ever need to talk, my door's always open." Sarah appreciated the offer, though she knew there were aspects of her current assignment that she could never discuss with anyone outside her unit. The isolation that came with classified work was one of the hardest parts of her new role. Having to compartmentalize her life, to maintain cover stories even with fellow Marines, went against everything she had learned about military brotherhood. After changing back into her service uniform, Sarah made her way to the base club where many veterans and their families had gathered for an informal reception. The atmosphere was lighter here, with children playing and adults sharing stories over coffee and cake. It was a welcome contrast to the solemnity of the formal ceremony. Sarah found herself in conversation with Mrs. Chen, the widow of a Marine who had served with Miguel. The older woman's eyes were bright despite the sadness that never quite left them when discussing her late husband. "I see so much of Miguel in you, dear," Mrs. Chen said. "The same determination, the same sense of duty. He taught me everything I know about being a Marine," Sarah replied. "Even now, I find myself asking what he would do in difficult situations." "That's good," Mrs. Chen nodded. "The best way to honor our fallen is to carry their values forward. But remember to make your own choices too. Miguel would want you to forge your own path, not just follow in his footsteps." As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself growing restless. The social gathering was pleasant, but she felt the weight of her hidden responsibilities pressing on her consciousness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions that she couldn't discuss with anyone at this reception. The duality of her existence was becoming more pronounced with each passing day. She excused herself and stepped outside for some fresh air. The base was quieter now, with most families having departed for home. In the distance, she could see the flag still flying proudly in the fading afternoon light. Sarah thought about the different battles being fought around the world at that very moment, conflicts that most civilians would never know about. Her secure phone vibrated with an encrypted message. Sarah glanced around to ensure she wasn't being observed before checking the screen. It was a routine status update, but it reminded her that her current leave would end soon. Within days, she would be back in the field, conducting operations that pushed the boundaries of what was legally and morally acceptable in service to national security. The contradiction wasn't lost on her. Here she stood, having just participated in a ceremony celebrating military service and sacrifice, while knowing that her own service involved activities that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. The men and women honored in today's ceremony had fought conventional wars with clearly defined enemies and objectives. Sarah's battles were murkier, fought in the gray areas between war and peace. As she walked back toward the parking area, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a young girl in East Los Angeles who dreamed of following her brother into the Marines, to an elite operator conducting classified missions around the globe. Miguel had always believed she was capable of extraordinary things, but even he couldn't have imagined the path she would ultimately choose. The drive home gave Sarah time to process the day's emotions. The ceremony had been beautiful and meaningful, a fitting tribute to those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. But it had also reminded her of the cost of service, both for those who died and for those who continue to serve in their memory. Her small apartment off base felt empty after the day's activities. Sarah had deliberately chosen to live alone, knowing that her irregular schedule and security requirements made roommates impractical. The walls were decorated with photos of her family and Miguel, along with commendations from her conventional Marine service. The evidence of her special operations career remained hidden, locked away in classified files and her own memories. As she prepared for bed, Sarah looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at her looked tired but determined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve her country in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. She thought about Miguel and wondered if he would approve of the choices she had made. The hidden patch beneath her uniform represented a level of commitment and sacrifice that few people could understand. It marked her as someone willing to operate in the shadows, to make hard choices in service of a greater good. As Sarah turned off the lights and settled into bed, she knew that whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with the same courage and determination that Miguel had taught her. The alarm clock's sharp buzz cut through the early morning darkness of Sarah's apartment. 4:30 came too soon after the emotional weight of Veterans Day, but her body had been conditioned to respond regardless of how she felt. Years of military discipline had programmed her to function on minimal sleep and maximum focus. Sarah rolled out of bed and immediately began her morning routine. Physical training was non-negotiable, even on days when her heart felt heavy. She pulled on her running gear and stepped into the cool pre-dawn air. The streets were empty except for the occasional delivery truck and a few other early risers beginning their day. As her feet pounded against the pavement, Sarah's mind began to clear. Running had always been her meditation, a time when the complexities of her dual existence could fade into the rhythm of breathing and movement. She covered her usual 6-mile route through the neighborhoods surrounding the base, pushing herself harder than necessary as a way to channel the restless energy that had kept her awake most of the night. When she returned to her apartment, Sarah noticed a black sedan parked across the street that hadn't been there when she left. Her training kicked in automatically, cataloging details about the vehicle and its occupants without appearing to pay attention. The car was clean but not new, with tinted windows and government plates. 2 figures sat in the front seats, both wearing dark clothing and maintaining the kind of alertness that marked them as professionals. Sarah didn't break stride as she entered her building, but she made a mental note to check for surveillance during her next trip outside. In her line of work, unexpected visitors could mean anything from routine security checks to mission deployments that couldn't wait for normal communication channels. After showering and changing into her service uniform, Sarah prepared a simple breakfast while checking her secure communications. The encrypted device showed 2 new messages, both marked with priority codes that indicated time-sensitive information. The first was a routine intelligence briefing about regional developments in Southeast Asia. The second made her pause mid-bite of her toast. Report for special briefing at 0800 hours. Building 47, Room 201. Bring personal gear and be prepared for extended deployment. Colonel Harrison sends. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Building 47 was located in the restricted section of the base, where most personnel weren't authorized to enter. Colonel Harrison was her handler for special operations assignments, a stern but fair officer who had personally recruited her into the classified program. Extended deployment meant she could be gone anywhere from weeks to months, depending on the mission parameters. She finished breakfast quickly and gathered her gear bag, a carefully packed collection of personal items and specialized equipment that could support her for weeks in the field. The bag contained everything from civilian clothing suitable for various climates to advanced communication devices and defensive tools that weren't standard issue for regular Marines. The drive to base took longer than usual due to increased security checks. Sarah noticed additional guards at the gates and more thorough inspections of vehicles. Something significant was happening, though the exact nature remained unclear. The guards who checked her credentials were polite but focused, their eyes scanning her face and credentials with unusual intensity. Building 47 sat apart from the main administrative complex, surrounded by additional fencing and security cameras. Sarah had been here many times over the past 2 years, but the site still made her feel a mixture of pride and apprehension. This was where her real work began, where the conventional Marine ended and the special operator took over. The security desk inside the building was staffed by 2 MPs who knew her by sight but still verified her credentials and checked her against their access list. "Good morning, Sergeant Martinez," the senior guard said. "Colonel Harrison is waiting for you in the briefing room. Elevator access has been authorized for your clearance level." Sarah nodded and made her way to the elevator, using her access card to reach the second floor. The hallways were stark and functional, decorated only with security reminders and emergency procedures. Room 201 was at the end of the corridor, behind a heavy door marked with warnings about classified discussions and authorized personnel only. Colonel Harrison stood at attention as she entered, his crisp uniform and bearing reflecting decades of military service. At 55, he remained physically imposing despite the gray that had crept into his hair over the years Sarah had known him. His face showed the kind of weathered confidence that came from leading difficult missions in challenging environments. "Sergeant Martinez," he said, returning her salute. "I trust your Veterans Day observance was meaningful." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the emotional residue from visiting Miguel's grave. "Thank you for allowing me the time." "Your brother's sacrifice continues to inspire those who knew him," Harrison said, his tone softening slightly. "I hope you know that his memory helps drive the important work we do here." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest at the mention of Miguel. Even in this classified environment, his influence remained strong. "Yes, sir. I'm ready for whatever mission you have for me." Harrison gestured for her to take a seat at the conference table while he activated the room's security protocols. The door locks engaged with an audible click, and Sarah could see the red light indicating that the room was now fully secured against electronic surveillance. Whatever they were about to discuss was serious enough to require maximum operational security. "What I'm about to share with you is classified at the highest levels," Harrison began, pulling up a digital presentation on the wall-mounted screen. "The operation we're planning will require all of your skills and training, plus some new challenges we haven't encountered before." The screen showed a map of a region Sarah recognized as somewhere in Central Asia, though the specific country wasn't immediately clear from the geographic features displayed. Red markers indicated various points of interest, while blue lines showed what appeared to be patrol routes or supply lines. The complexity of the visual suggested a large-scale operation with multiple moving parts. "Intelligence sources have identified a weapons trafficking network that's been supplying advanced technology to various terrorist organizations," Harrison continued. "The network is sophisticated, well-funded, and has connections to several state actors who prefer to maintain plausible deniability about their involvement." Sarah studied the map, noting the strategic importance of the locations marked. The region was known for its political instability and porous borders, making it an ideal environment for illegal weapons trading. "What's my role in the operation, sir?" "You'll be part of a 5-person team tasked with infiltrating the network and gathering intelligence on their supply chains and financial backing," Harrison explained. "The mission requires someone who can operate independently in a complex environment while maintaining a convincing cover identity." He clicked to the next slide, which showed surveillance photos of several individuals. Sarah recognized the type of intelligence gathering that had gone into developing these profiles. The men and women in the photos looked like ordinary civilians, but their body language and positioning suggested military or intelligence training. "These are the known associates of the trafficking network's leadership," Harrison said. Your team will need to establish contact with at least two of these individuals and gain their trust sufficiently to access their operations. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that came with new mission assignments. This type of long-term infiltration work was exactly what she had trained for, but it also represented significant personal risk. "What's the timeline for deployment, sir?" "You leave tomorrow evening," Harrison replied. "Commercial flight to Frankfurt, then military transport to a forward operating base in the region. Your cover identity has already been established, and you'll receive detailed briefings on your background and objectives once you're in theater." The quick turnaround was typical for their unit, but it still meant Sarah would have to make rapid arrangements for her personal affairs. Her apartment lease was structured to accommodate extended absences, and her family had grown accustomed to her irregular communication schedule. Still, leaving on such short notice always created logistical challenges. Harrison continued his briefing, providing details about the team composition and command structure. Sarah would be working with 4 other specialists, including a communications expert, a weapons specialist, and 2 officers with extensive experience in the target region. The team leader was someone she had worked with before, which provided some comfort about the mission dynamics. "Your specific expertise in cultural adaptation and language skills made you the obvious choice for this assignment," Harrison said. "The target population includes several ethnic groups, and your ability to blend in will be crucial for mission success." Sarah had spent considerable time over the past year studying various languages and cultural practices, preparing for exactly this type of operation. Her natural talent for picking up languages, combined with intensive training, had made her one of the unit's most versatile operators. She could convincingly pass as a local in several different regions, depending on the mission requirements. "Are there any specific concerns I should be aware of, sir?" Sarah asked. Harrison's expression grew more serious. "Intelligence suggests that the weapons being trafficked include some advanced technology that could pose significant threats to U.S. forces in the region. The network has also shown sophistication in their security practices, which means any mistakes on our part could have serious consequences." The implication was clear. This wasn't just another intelligence-gathering mission. The stakes were high enough that mission failure could result in American casualties or significant strategic setbacks. Sarah felt the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. "I understand, sir," she said. "What about extraction procedures if things go wrong?" "Standard protocols apply, with some modifications based on the political sensitivities of the region," Harrison replied. "You'll have emergency communication channels and predetermined extraction points, but the nature of the mission means you may need to remain in character even under significant pressure." They spent the next hour reviewing operational details, security procedures, and contingency plans. Sarah took notes on the sensitive information while committing the most critical details to memory. Much of what they discussed couldn't be written down, requiring her to develop mental maps and memorize complex procedures. As the briefing concluded, Harrison handed her a sealed envelope containing her initial deployment orders and travel documents. "Your cover identity materials will be provided at the forward operating base," he said. "Study them carefully, but remember that the most important element of any cover is your ability to think and react naturally under pressure." Sarah stood and prepared to leave, her mind already shifting into mission preparation mode. There were numerous tasks to complete before her departure, from securing her apartment to arranging for mail forwarding. More importantly, she needed to mentally prepare for the psychological challenges of extended undercover work. "One more thing, Sergeant," Harrison said as she reached the door. "This mission has the attention of very senior officials. Success here could open doors to assignments at even higher levels of responsibility." Sarah nodded, understanding the significance of his words. Advancement in the special operations community was based on demonstrated performance under the most challenging conditions. A successful mission like this could lead to opportunities she had only dreamed about when she first joined the program. Leaving Building 47, Sarah felt the familiar transformation that occurred when shifting between her conventional Marine identity and her special operations role. The two aspects of her service required different mindsets, different priorities, and different relationships with the truth. It was a psychological balancing act that had become second nature over the past 2 years. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from her team leader, Major Williams. Team meeting at 1400 hours. Location TBD. Bring your game face. The casual tone belied the serious nature of what lay ahead. Williams had a reputation for maintaining morale through humor while never compromising on professional standards. Sarah spent the remainder of the morning completing administrative tasks and preparing for her absence. She arranged for automatic bill payments, secured her apartment, and sent carefully worded messages to family members explaining that she would be out of communication for an extended period. The cover story she used involved a training exercise in a location with limited communication capabilities. The team meeting took place in a secure conference room in a different building, away from the main special operations facilities. This level of compartmentalization was standard procedure for sensitive missions, ensuring that operational details remained isolated from routine base activities. Sarah arrived early and found Major Williams already reviewing materials at the conference table. At 42, Williams had spent nearly 2 decades in various special operations roles. His calm demeanor and strategic thinking had earned him respect throughout the special operations community. Martinez, Williams said, looking up from his documents. Ready for another adventure in exotic locations and interesting people who want to kill us? Always, sir, Sarah replied with a slight smile. Williams' dark humor was one of the ways he helped his teams cope with the psychological pressure of their work. The other team members arrived within minutes of each other. Sarah knew Sergeant Thompson, the communications specialist, from a previous mission in Eastern Europe. His expertise with both conventional and improvised communication methods had proven invaluable when operating in areas with limited infrastructure. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was new to Sarah's experience but came with strong recommendations from other team leaders. His specialty in weapons and explosives would be crucial if the mission escalated beyond intelligence gathering. His quiet confidence and attention to detail were evident even in casual conversation. The fifth team member was Captain Morrison, an intelligence officer with extensive experience in the target region. Her knowledge of local political dynamics and cultural nuances would help the team navigate complex social situations while maintaining their cover identities. Williams began the meeting by reviewing mission objectives and establishing communication protocols. Each team member would have specific responsibilities while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances. Sarah's role would focus on establishing contact with target individuals while the others provided support and gathered complementary intelligence. Remember that we're going in clean, Williams emphasized. No obvious American military connections, no equipment that can't be explained by our cover identities. We succeed through preparation, improvisation, and staying in character no matter what happens. They spent 2 hours reviewing regional intelligence, studying the profiles of their targets, and rehearsing various scenarios they might encounter. Sarah found herself impressed by the thoroughness of the preparation, though she knew that no amount of planning could account for every possible complication they might face in the field. As the meeting concluded, Williams assigned each team member specific preparation tasks to complete before departure. Sarah's list included final language practice with a regional dialect coach and procurement of appropriate civilian clothing for her cover identity. Get some rest tonight, Williams advised as they prepared to leave. Tomorrow starts what could be a very long deployment. Take care of yourselves and watch each other's backs once we're in country. Sarah drove home with her mind racing through mission details and preparation requirements. The familiar pre-deployment mix of excitement and anxiety was settling in, accompanied by the knowledge that she would soon be operating in an environment where mistakes could have fatal consequences. That evening, as she packed her gear and reviewed her cover identity materials, Sarah found herself thinking about Miguel and what he would think of her current assignment. His service had been conventional but no less dangerous, involving direct combat against clearly defined enemies. Her work operated in murkier territory, where the lines between right and wrong were often blurred by political necessity. She fell asleep that night with the encrypted briefing materials secured in her safe and her deployment bag ready by the door. Tomorrow would begin another chapter in her secret career, another test of her skills and commitment to serving her country in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. The hidden patch beneath her uniform represented more than just elite training or special access. It symbolized her willingness to operate in the shadows, to make difficult choices in service of objectives that most people would never understand. As Sarah drifted off to sleep, she wondered what new challenges awaited her in the mountains and valleys of Central Asia. The commercial flight from Dulles to Frankfurt felt endless despite Sarah's attempt to use the travel time for final mission preparation. She sat in the middle section of the Boeing 777, dressed in civilian clothes that marked her as just another business traveler making a transatlantic crossing. Her cover identity as a freelance journalist specializing in economic development stories provided the perfect reason for traveling to the region where her real mission would unfold. Around her, passengers dozed, read, or stared at entertainment screens, blissfully unaware that the woman in seat 23E was carrying intelligence briefings in her memory that could alter the balance of power in a volatile region. Sarah had spent months learning to compartmentalize her thoughts, to maintain a normal exterior while processing the kind of information that most people couldn't imagine. The overnight flight gave her time to review her cover story once more. Elena Vasquez was a Cuban-American journalist with a master's degree in international economics from Georgetown University. She had published articles in various trade publications about emerging markets and economic development in post-conflict regions. The identity was built on enough real information to withstand casual scrutiny while providing flexibility for the kind of access Sarah would need for her actual mission. When the plane landed in Frankfurt, Sarah moved through customs and immigration with the practiced ease of someone who traveled frequently for legitimate business purposes. Her passport showed stamps from various countries where Elena Vasquez had supposedly conducted research, each entry carefully crafted to support her cover identity. The military transport portion of her journey began at a small airfield outside Frankfurt, where she met up with the rest of her team. Major Williams looked relaxed despite the early hour, while Sergeant Thompson was already checking his communications equipment. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez studied maps on his tablet, and Captain Morrison reviewed intelligence updates that had come in during their travel. "Any changes to our operational parameters?" Sarah asked Williams as they waited to board the C-130 that would take them to their forward operating base. "Nothing major," Williams replied. "Some increased activity in the border regions, but intelligence thinks it's related to seasonal migration patterns rather than operational security for our targets." The flight to their destination took 6 hours, during which Sarah tried to sleep while fighting the combination of jet lag and pre-mission anxiety that always affected her before deployment. The C-130 was loud and uncomfortable, filled with military personnel and equipment heading to various assignments throughout the region. Their forward operating base was located in a compound that had been established during previous military operations. The facilities were basic but functional, providing secure accommodation and communication capabilities for teams conducting missions throughout the surrounding area. Sarah had been to similar bases before, but each deployment brought new challenges and unknown variables. Colonel Patterson, the base commander, briefed them on local conditions and security procedures during their first evening in country. "The political situation remains fluid," he explained, pointing to a large map that dominated one wall of the briefing room. "Various tribal groups maintain uneasy truces with the central government, while criminal organizations operate with varying degrees of official tolerance." Sarah studied the map, noting the locations where her team would be operating over the coming weeks. The terrain was mountainous and remote, with few roads and limited government presence. It was exactly the kind of environment where weapons trafficking networks could operate with relative impunity. "Your target area has seen increased activity over the past month," Patterson continued. "Nothing that suggests they're aware of your mission, but enough to warrant additional caution as you establish your operational presence." Williams asked several questions about extraction procedures and emergency communication protocols. The remote location meant that help would be hours away if something went wrong, placing additional emphasis on the team's ability to handle problems independently. That night, Sarah reviewed her cover identity materials one final time before destroying the classified briefing documents according to security protocols. Elena Vasquez's background was now firmly embedded in her memory, complete with childhood experiences, educational details, and professional history that she could discuss naturally under questioning. The next morning brought their first operational challenge. Local transportation to their target area required negotiating with tribal leaders who controlled access to the mountain roads. Captain Morrison took the lead in these discussions, using her cultural knowledge and language skills to establish the relationships they would need. They want to know why an American journalist is interested in their economic development, Morrison explained after her initial meeting with tribal representatives. I told them you're writing about how traditional communities adapt to modern economic pressures. It was a plausible story that would provide cover for the kind of questions Sarah would need to ask.